We've heard we need to be investing in capital, collaboration and cooperation, and tonight we're going to add another two C's to the mix, those C's being complementarity and coherence. We have been exhorted over the course of the last few days to unite around the priorities of developing countries, to get finance where it's needed quickly, and to power a surge in climate action. And that's what we're doing this evening. We've convened the 4 principles of the 4 climate investment funds, and I believe it's for the first time ever. You're witnessing something unique, not just to talk about how our investments individually contribute to climate action, but actually how we are more together, more than the sum of our parts when we operate together. How are our visions and missions as the 4 climate investment funds mutually reinforcing? How are we building complementarity in policies and programmings? Tonight we're going to unpack that together with the help of some guest speakers and panels. And at the end of this evening we'll actually release a joint declaration from the 4 funds that will detail 2 really important aspects. 1, we want to, together, enhance access to climate finance. That's all about joint programming, joint country-led investment planning, developing common indicators, simplifying access and processes. And the second thing we want to do on top of enhancing access is naturally increase impact. We want to increase impact through collaborating, sharing those times when things went wrong and when they went right. We want to move far more private sector finance. We want to increase investment into adaptation. And these are the areas we're going to discuss tonight with the help of our panel. But before we get into the guts of the discussion, it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Simon Still, Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, to open tonight. Mr. Still, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And in terms of what day of the week it is, I too have absolutely no idea. I said to somebody the other day, I'm going through this one shirt at a time. I've got racks of shirts, and as I put each one at the end of the day in the wash bag, I know it's one less day we're here. But colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, friends, the establishment of the Climate Fund's youngest sibling, the Loss and Damage Fund, and its initial pledge in the region of, the latest number I heard was $700 million, has set COP28 on a positive track from day one. The additional pledges to the Green Climate Fund, now totaling around $12.5 billion, is also a very, very good news. And Mafalda, congratulations, and the number we hope will increase. But we have challenges with the Adaptation Fund. It's not where it needs to be, so we know we still have many challenges ahead. Adequate access to funding is crucial for mitigating climate change, adapting to its impacts, and addressing the loss and damages in developing countries. But we know that the international financial system is not working for large parts of the developing world. Climate finance, while growing, is not yet sufficiently flowing to developing countries. Perceived or real risks drive up interest rates in many developing countries. Cost of capital is simply too high to invest at the required scale and speed. MDBs play a vital role for developing countries' economic progress. These banks have a fast-growing role in climate finance, but they're not yet fully adjusted or equipped to prioritize climate finance to the extent that is needed. Again, affordability and availability, but also accessibility are the key words here. This is particularly true for adaptation funding, which is harder to monetize quickly or directly. This makes adaptation a more challenging funding proposition. Availability and accessibility to grant-based resources are the key words here. This is particularly important for vulnerable countries and that have the most significant capacity constraints. Accessing funding from the multilateral development banks and even from funds is often complex and resource consuming for low and middle income countries. Slow disbursements are often a concern. The joint new commitment to strengthen complementarity and coherence, improve and streamline access procedures and channels for finance is critical in delivering and the urgently needed finance to address climate. So let me share my thoughts on why I believe this is so. First, your collective experience in funding concrete projects and programs makes you uniquely positioned to promote efforts to better align mobilization and delivery of resources within the broader system of multilateral institutions. They need to align with needs and priorities of developing countries, and you can help in doing that. Second, your commitment here at COP28 to work together to enhance access to climate finance through strengthening complementarity and coherence is the signal that is needed. Third, your knowledge of multilateral and country-level climate policies are crucial as the multilateral system intensifies efforts to leverage private, domestic, as well as other bilateral and multilateral financing towards climate. And last but not least, you are an important pillar of support in developing countries, NDCs, and national adaptation plans. The four funds hosting this event today are therefore pillars of hope and agents of transformative change. They're extremely important for developing, least developed countries and small island developing states, which are disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change. But let's not tiptoe around this. Climate funds are severely underfunded. This insufficient scale limits their ability to generate sufficient impact. The funds do splendid work already, but if we can't see a significant increase in the resources committed to these funds, we'll never be able to address the scale of the crisis that we face. Colleagues, the UNFCCC Secretariat stands by your side. We're all part of the multilateral support system that's here to provide support for those who need it most. We will be here to support you and ensure that we have collective success and then support of the 8 billion people who depend on us to do the right thing. I applaud you for this bold initiative and look forward to massive action coming out of this much-needed effort. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. We've been exhorted, actually held up as agents of change, beacons of hope, and we've been exhorted to not tiptoe through the task we have ahead of us. And we are certainly not intending to tiptoe anywhere this evening. In fact, we're going to storm ahead now and we're going to welcome Dr. Simon Zadek, who's the Executive Director of Nature Finance, please, to the stage, who will moderate the panel sessions. And can I please invite the first panellists to join Dr. Zadek on the stage. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stefan, and good evening, everybody. I'm amazed. For those who still think they should have their jackets on or anything else, I suggest you take them off as quickly as possible if you want to survive the evening. I'm the Executive Director of Nature Finance, super pleased to be chairing the two sessions for the rest of the evening. Absolutely. And I suggest we get straight on. Could I invite the first panel to join? Alexa, maybe you would come on up. Tatiana, obviously Dirk Meyer and Shang Bei, if you join the first panel, we can kick straight off. Hi, Alexia. Good to see you. So, as the advert indicated, we have two panels this evening. The first are a set of critical stakeholders and actors involved in creating the enabling conditions for the funds that we're talking about this evening to really function effectively. And we're going to hear a little bit from each of them about how they see the funds in their current situation, but also how, as we heard, future collaboration and integration, connectivity can actually work to the advantage of making those funds more impactful. So welcome to all of you. I'm not going to spend a long time on the introductions. I'm going to jump straight in to the first round of questions. I think we're all keen to hear on the substance. Simon already made the observation in his opening remarks. There's an awful lot of money needed. The climate funds have done well to differing degrees, but all are, should we say, tadpoles in the context of the real scale, the hundreds of billions and trillions that everyone talks about all over this very large site that we're wandering around in every day. And so I'd like to start actually by asking each of you pretty much the same question to give you a chance just to locate us in your view. You know, if we're dealing with what are ultimately very small funds compared to the scale of financing that is needed, how do we understand the funds as they currently are today? And given that they're not going to become vast in the trillions, we assume, going forward, how do you see the way in which they can be most effective going forward? And Tatiana, actually, I thought I'd start with you, if I may, and then Alexia, I'll come on to you second.
Thank you very much. Good night to all, I guess. It's a pleasure to be here today with you, fellow panelists, and this audience at this time. Brazil actually has just assumed the G20 presidency 2 days ago, on December 1st. And we believe this, the G20 can actually help a lot this effort that we are all part, and due to its breadth, both on the political and financial side, give a special boost to our commitments here. I would like to take this opportunity to share some ideas that we are bringing to
Tatiana, I'm going to ask you, I'm told that the wonderful air conditioning is blocking your noise.
Oh.
And so I'm going to ask you just to shout
Speak
a little
closer.
louder and speak a little closer.
Closer, I'll do that. Thank you. We face the challenge of proposing priorities and mediating debates among members of the G20 and bring consensus to the table so that we can fulfill our ambitions. In this context, I would like to highlight that the Brazilian G20 presidency has already proposed the setup of a task force for the global mobilization for climate change, and also the role of the Sustainable Finance Working Group, which has a central role. And I have here actually both the co-chairs, the US and China, that will be the co-chairs for this group. And it will serve as a forum for the G20 leadership to support the delivery of the Paris Agreement and 2030 agenda. Be very objective. Under Brazil's G20 solutions-oriented presidency, we are proposing 4 priorities, starting with the optimization of the international environment and climate funds, which goes hand in hand with the proposals that and the joint statement that we'll see, I suppose, later today. And I'm delighted to see that the 4 funds are actually making my job easier because you are already working together, and this is something that we are very, very happy to see. And actually, we also would like to put here a call so that we work together with G20 members and the 4 funds in their first priority. Another one is advancing just transitions. Then implementing the sustainability reporting requirements that work for all, including small and medium-sized enterprises and EMDEs, and financing nature-based solutions. I guess our chair will like that. So the first priority is designed to streamline access to environment and climate funds through the evaluation of the effectiveness of existing vertical funds. By conducting a detailed analysis of these funds, we aim to identify, within G20, opportunities for optimization, ensuring that resources are deployed in the most efficient way possible. Simultaneously, it is essential to identify funding gaps on biodiversity protection and strategies for mitigation and adaptation to climate change in developing countries. Based on this analysis, we propose to develop targeted solutions to address the identified funding shortfalls. These solutions might include improving current funds and the creation of new financial instruments to meet present and future needs. To ensure the effective implementation of these solutions, we will develop a comprehensive action plan. This plan will serve as a roadmap guiding us towards a more sustainable future. Lastly, we will also monitor and regularly report on the progress of this actions plan implementation, ensuring transparency and accountability in our journey towards environmental sustainability. In this sense, we reinforce the intention to open a permanent dialogue with the 4 climate funds in the context of our G20 presidency, and we recognize the efforts of deepen the collaboration between the funds. This is fundamental to implement this ambitious priority. Also, under the G20 Brazilian presidency, the Sovereign Sustainable Finance Working Group will provide actionable insights and recommendations for addressing the financial challenges and scaling up nature-based solutions in developing countries, which relates to other actions from the climate funds. CIFs Nature, People and Climate Program was built around nature-based solutions. The GCF recently published a working paper, number 5, called Making Blended Finance Work for Nature-Based Solutions, that supports nature-based solutions by effectively combining different financial instruments. Blended finance also allows the GEF to mobilize additional financial resources for sustainable development by integrating grants and loans. The Sustainable Finance Working Group 4th priority includes the assessment of different financial solutions such as risk-sharing instruments, blended finance instruments, and other forms of leveraging private capital in the context of financing nature-based solutions. In the national context, if you allow me, the goals of multilateral climate funds align seamlessly with Brazil's ambitious ecological transformation plan, which is led by the Ministry of Finance in Brazil, forms a robust nexus between global environmental objectives and the nation's domestic sustainability agenda. As Brazil seeks to advance its ecological transformation, leveraging climate funds becomes instrumental in catalyzing transformative initiatives. These funds can serve as a cornerstone for financing and accelerating sustainable projects, supporting the adoption of green technologies, and bolstering resilience in vulnerable ecosystems. By strategically aligning the objectives of climate funds with the key pillars of the Brazilian Ecological Transformation Plan, we not only contribute to global climate action, but also ensure that Brazil's commitment to ecological sustainability is reinforced through tangible, impactful measures on both national and international fronts. This synergy underscores the interconnected nature of our collective efforts towards a more sustainable and resilient future. Even though there is a pressing need to boost resources for multilateral climate funds, it is essential to highlight that increasing concessional climate finance alone is not enough. Addressing the urgency of currency risk is equally crucial, as foreign exchange fluctuations pose a significant challenge for emerging and developing countries. In concessional investment, currency risk potentially undermines the concessional nature of financing and hinders global progress in climate finance. Mitigating currency risk is vital for the economic viability of climate initiatives also, ensuring effective and scalable efforts to combat climate change in vulnerable regions. Moreover, to further amplify the impact of these funds, it's valuable to consider enhancing their agility in approving and implementing projects, which I think we all actually agree here. And this involves expediting the mobilization of resources and place an even greater emphasis on capacity building and knowledge transfer to beneficiary countries. So just to conclude, as I said, this is a very crucial part of our agenda. It also goes hand in hand with the agenda for MDB and strengthening MDB reforms. And we are delighted to work with you along the next year and the partners. Thank you.
Tatiana, that's absolutely fantastic. What a huge agenda. And in a second, we're going to ask Alexia and also the other co-chairs, Zhang Bei, as to how on earth you're going to get all that work done during the course of 2024. But certainly, that's a target to aim for and keen to see how that goes. Alexia, I'm going to turn to you, and I'm going to ask you a sort of double question, if I may. So before you get to the G20 piece, it would be interesting, given your board roles on the different funds and the announcement that was recently made, for you just to kind of step back from the G20 story and start with how you see the climate funds working together going forward, and then perhaps reflect on how the G20 process can contribute to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Simon. And it's great to see everyone here. It's great to see the four leaders of the four big funds together. First time, maybe, not last time for sure. And I hope many of the partners and clients of the funds are also in this room so that you hold them accountable to this declaration that we will be later on celebrating in the most friendly of ways, accountable, of course. So listen, simply put, these four funds are absolutely essential for countries that do not have the domestic resources to be able to make the necessary investments in climate mitigation, adaptation, resilience, for countries that are not yet attractive investment destinations for foreign direct investment, and for countries that are facing debt vulnerabilities. These funds are absolutely essential. Simon is right, well, both Simons are right, I guess, in saying that, yes, however much countries are making an effort to replenish them, they're not large enough given the enormity of the challenge. And so the question, and I think you used the word amplify, Tatiana, is how do you amplify something that's of a certain size to try and get it to have oversized impact? There are a couple of ways. First of all, the fact that these are multilateral funds, I think, matters tremendously. The ability to pool money from different sovereigns matters tremendously. The ability to try, and we can talk about the improvement side later, to align priorities and to be more coherent for countries matters. The fact that the governance of these funds is balanced, developing countries, developed countries, matters tremendously. And then in terms of the money, I think the challenge ahead, and the funds I think are evolving, is to try and maximize the funds as much as possible. And part of that is trying to leverage the diversity of instruments that most of the funds have. So not just grants, important though grants absolutely are, but loans, equity for many of them, guarantees as well, to really leverage this diversity of financial instruments to make more possible, to have a multiplication effort, and also to, wherever possible, be able to leverage in the private sector. And so I was pouring through some of the data from the Green Climate Fund the other night. I hope I got it right. Mafalda will keep me on my toes if I haven't. But what I noticed is that the use, for example, of the equity and guarantee instruments has increased, so that it's about 50% of what's done by the GCF between 2020 and 2023, compared to only 20% between 2015 and 2020. And guarantees and equity obviously are instruments that are quite important when trying to bring in the private sector. And about 35% of what the GCF does in terms of its cumulative outstanding portfolio in 2023 was with the private sector as well. So I think that's kind of action is what we need. We need the funds to help de-risk transactions to bring private sector investment into either new countries or new sectors in countries where they wouldn't otherwise go. Very exciting also in terms of the climate investment funds, work that's being done to be able to use the reflows from countries and from project sponsors to be able to issue bonds. And so there's work happening now, we hope in 2024, that through the CIF capital market mechanism, we will see a bond issuance, and that should enable the CIFs to have approximately $500 million more in new commitments availability. Now, I want to be clear, you can't leverage everything, because leverage, I love that word, everyone loves the word, but you need a foundation to leverage against. So I also want to be clear, A, that you need that foundation. Secondly, for certain types of needs, for certain types of countries, you will need grant funding as well. Okay, so we need to push as much as we can to get the leverage, but not forget that we're also about a mission, and in certain cases, whether it's for SIDS, whether it's for least developed countries, whether it's for certain African nations, whether it's for adaptation or resilience, we also need grant funding. So that's a little bit, when I think of the funds that I see the agenda, and you want me to go straight to the G20?
Why don't you actually hold, let me kind of come back to you on
Yeah.
that, if I may, for a second. I think that's a kind of first piece to kind of put out there. It left me wondering, you know, the loss and damage fund, the kind of next kid on the block, if you like, kind of what's the learning that you're taking, given your involvement in these different funds, that really might inform different approaches to the way in which that fund might evolve going forward. Maybe it's a question to come back to on the second round.
Yeah, I'll do that in the second round, but I'm sorry, you kind of hinted at an announcement, but just in case you missed it, I would be remiss if I did not say that Vice President Harris yesterday made two announcements that are relevant to the funds. The first one is a $3 billion commitment to the second replenishment of the Green Climate Fund, and then the second was a $568 million concessional loan to the Clean Technology Fund. So I wanted to say that.
And I felt that if I did more than hint it, I'd take away your thunder.
You.
So you're absolutely there on that. So absolutely. Xiangbei, I'm going to come to you next with great delight. My question, as written down in my text, talks about what PBOC has done in advancing green finance. That's something I know very personally, having been involved in the early work that PBOC has actually done. You know, sometimes we kind of forget that PBOC is a central bank. Because you seem to spend so much time sort of convening and driving and catalyzing action in so many other ways. But I wanted to start by asking you maybe to come back to sort of the core of what PBOC does as a central bank, as a regulator, as a supervisor. Kind of what can we learn from that core work that the PBOC does that can inform this agenda going forward, and then afterwards we can come back to the G20 role that you obviously have taken a key lead on.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. It's a good question. Actually, we all know that the central bank, the main task of the central bank is to control inflation, right, and to promote the growth of the economy. However, in China, yeah, the central bank really do a lot in green finance. Why? Why? Because we are in a development phase that we require a high-quality development. The green finance will help to promote a high-quality development in China. That's why we take many measures to in this area in green finance and transition finance. Actually, we have do a lot of work. We call it 5 pillars. 5 pillars. Yeah, I'd like to just make a little bit.
Please.
Yeah. The first pillar is the taxonomy. Because in green finance and transition finance, the first thing you have to do is to define what is green and transition activities and investment. This will enable market participants to assess and mitigate greenwashing risks and thus protect market integrity, facilitating the flow of capital towards investment and support climate goals. For example, the PBOC, together with China Securities Regulatory Commission and other departments, issued the Green Bond Endorsed Projects Catalog, which provide a solid foundation for green bond market. then the investors and the enterprises, they know what is green, what they can invest. So it's quite important. And the second pillar is the information disclosure. We all know that the reliable, consistent, verifiable, and comparable information on climate financing could help interested investors and other stakeholders to evaluate whether the activities and relevant investments are aligned with the Paris Agreement. We issued some guidance for financial institutions how to disclose their information in their green and transition finance. Now we may strengthen the requirement. Maybe at first, the financial institutions and the enterprises, they do not know how to do the carbon accounting. But when the markets mature, now more and more enterprises and financial institutions, they know how to calculate the carbon accounting. And also, there should be some prerequisite for this kind of carbon accounting, because we have to fill up the data gap. So it's in a gradual way. Okay, and the third pillar is to promote the development of financial products and markets. Actually, by the end of the third quarter of 2023, the outstanding green loans and green bonds in China were about 28 trillion yuan and 1.9 trillion yuan respectively. And we also introduced some new financial products, such as carbon neutrality bonds and sustainability-linked bonds. This will facilitate targeted capital flow towards the goal of carbon emission reduction. That is pillar 3. And the fourth pillar is that we design some policy measures to improve the incentive and restraint mechanism that is more closely related to the monetary policy. We have one monetary policy instrument, that is the Carbon Emission Reduction Facility. It will supporting financial institutions to provide loans at preferential rates to enterprises engaged in clean energy reservation, and environmental protection. Just as Simon has mentioned that we are in a high interest rate environment, but the fund our central bank provided to the financial institutions, the interest rate is only 1.75%. So it's quite low, yeah. And the last pillar is the international cooperation on green finance. Just as Simon has mentioned, that the PBOC is the co-chair of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, and PBOC and the European Commission jointly published Common Ground Taxonomy. Yeah. This taxonomy improves the comparability and interoperability of taxonomies and helps to lower the transboundary costs of green investment and scale up the mobilization of green capital internationally. So that's what the central banks can do. Central banks really can play an important role in green and transition finance. There are many scopes that we can cover. So I think maybe with joint efforts with all of us, then we can achieve the final goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Shangbai. And maybe not as known to all of you in the room, or perhaps to some of you, is that it was the PBOC and the Bank of England who together really brought the subject of green and then sustainable finance to the G20, originally under the Chinese presidency, but also opened the doors for what is now 130 central banks and financial supervisors working through the network for central banks for greening the financial system, really to kind of enter the room and become part of this conversation. So really quite a considerable achievement. Dirk, I'm going to come on to you if I may, and I know that you have to leave after your first round of observations and head off to another session. So here's your chance to kind of put it on the table, right? No pressure at all. So obviously, Germany is deeply involved in the development of these climate funds, has been since the outset, has contributed sort of political engagement, bringing different actors together as well as funds. Kind of, picking up on kind of the earlier points that Stefan made, the new declaration to come, the need for the different funds to begin to work together. What would you really hope for in that agenda going forward over the next year or so? So kind of casting forward a little bit, since you just have kind of one round in this session.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe 4 points I would like to make on that. You mentioned the engagement of Germany. We all know the strong engagement of many of the traditional contributors. But one of the first things when it comes to money, to start with that, is that we have to open up the scenery, and we have to urge also new contributors to get on board and to set up. And in that respect, I think the loss and damage was a strong signal to show that new contributors are coming on board, but still this is just a tiny signal. There has to be much more pressure in that, to be very clear on that. Secondly, I think you mentioned that having the 4 funds together for the first time, it shows that there's also some kind of things to improve, and it is great to have them and to have the new agenda on the 4 Cs. But we all know who are dealing with any kind of administration that this is a very tough job when it comes, for instance, to joint programming. So it's the second one is really to put a lot of also administrative and creative pressure into the system, and to be able to really break silos in some respects. I think that is the second one that is necessary for the future. The fourth one is the third one is more complementarity. I would say. And that means that I heard it from everybody, be a bit more brave for even innovative instruments, new instruments, and try to find fields where maybe even in joint programming we could try to find more innovation. For instance, when it comes to debt swaps and things like that, to try to be very much creative and try to use new ways. And the fourth one is the topic, or is maybe the momentum. When we look at the evolution process of the World Bank and see the mission and vision, and see its self view on the question of regarding the MDBs as a system, there is a big chance, also maybe a momentum in that, to use this strong partner for also new ways when it comes to joint programming and new ways. So there would be the 4 things that from the German government will be pushed forward, and we'd really like to contribute on that.
That's fantastic, Dirk. Thank you very much indeed. And maybe so you don't quite get away scot-free, just sort of one last question, which is, you have to your right the Sherpa for the G20 finance track talking about where it's going to go next year under the Brazil presidency. You have the 2 co-chairs of the Sustainable Finance Working Group. You've got a whole lot of people taking notes. You have the opportunity to kind of call out what kind of Germany's ambition is for next year's SFWG under the G20, in the context of this climate agenda and these climate funds. So maybe just a couple of comments from you on that would be super helpful.
Yes, I saw the agenda actually of the G20 presidency, and I saw a lot of pillars where we could actually keep up with that. And I mean, we heard from the beginning on that the question of how to get also private sector in our systems is a crucial one. How do we design sustainable finance instruments? That is very much on the agenda of the G20. And to work on that, Germany, G7, has a lot of input to give in there. And also seeing and bringing that together with the impulses we got from the evolution process from the World Bank, there is maybe also a momentum for the next year to open up even new ways in this respect.
Thank you, Dirk, very much. I think sort of adding to Tatiana's agenda, no pressure on the two co-chairs of the SFWG, who we'll come back to in a second. So thank you very much for managing to come to the session.
Sorry for rushing now.
No, absolutely the way it is here. Perhaps you join me in just giving Dirk a round of applause. So moving on briefly, my role is really principally a sort of glorified timekeeper. So we have just a few minutes more for this session. So I'm going to ask during this final round, perhaps, for you to kind of focus down your points. And we're going to start, Tatiana, with yourself. And actually, I wanted to ask you about the fact that Brazil doesn't have just one extraordinary international leadership role over the next couple of years, but two. Yeah, obviously, you're taking on the G20 presidency 2 days ago, actually, I think technically speaking, but also COP30 as we head into the year following. And maybe just a kind of a vision, perhaps not a detailed roadmap, of kind of how do the two connect? How do we make sure that what we can achieve during the G20 presidency next year on the climate and finance agenda plays its way through into the COP30 process the year after?
Thank you for this question. I actually, since we are in COP, the way we are looking at it at the finance track, but I could say the way the Brazilian government and the Brazilian G20 presidency is looking at COP and G20 is that the agendas are very much interconnected. Right? So, and actually would like to think outside of the box and give opportunities for members and for the G20 to bring the two tracks together. So when we propose global mobilization for combating climate change, or I actually saying it's okay that we work in the Sherpa's track on climate action and also on the finance track, but we would like to bring this together. We would like to have no, preconceptions or barriers that where we can only discuss up to a certain limit here and there. We are in a mission, right? We are in mission 1.5. We have an emergency and we have to put our best efforts and heads together. So the vision is that we really see this next year, and that's the way we are actually framing and shaping up a lot of our policies, including some of the proposals that the Brazilian government has announced here, or some of the ideas that have been announced, such as a tropical forest forever facility, for example, or the foreign exchange risk mitigation that we are studying with Inter-American Development Bank. We are even domestically looking at G20 as a stepping stone for COP30, and we believe this can only be done together with a lot of dialogue and consensus. So that is our mission. And to mention the issue of MDBs also that has been alluded to, we think it's very convergent with also what we were talking about, increasing access and interoperability. We face the same in MDBs, and we are also happy to see that the dialogue on MDBs as a system has been growing. We are supporting that by proposing that we have a roadmap for better, bigger, and more effective MDBs, developed also in close cooperation with MDBs. And I think it's very timely that we do that while we're also working and have the 4 funds working together. But to sum up, I think we are really in a moment where we have to pull all levers, right? We know that the solution will not come only, it's not one solution. and we have to take up all the opportunities of COP now and the different UN summits and G20. And we are happy to be in this position and encouraged by everything that we have heard here today from the funds and also from our partners. And let's get down to work. Thank you.
Thank you. And I mean, if any country can kind of connect the dots where we have seen it so difficult in the past, just between the Sherpa track and the finance track, but all of these other pieces that somehow are converging but are at the moment confusing, it'll be you. I won't ask you how the nature-based solution work will feed through to CBD COP16 next year. That's a slightly different topic we can touch on. Thank you, Tatiana. Alexa and Xiangpei, we just have really a couple of minutes left, and so I'm going to ask you to sort of move a little bit into soundbite mode and to put on your sort of co-chair's hat as G20 co-chairs of the SFWG. Huge agenda. G20 is a complicated animal to manage. This is not a simple process at all. Obviously, deeply experienced, both of you. You know, what's the hurdles that what's the hurdle that needs to be overcome in beginning to fulfill the ambition of the Brazilian presidency in kind of taking forward that climate finance agenda next year? I'll start with you, if I may, Alexa.
Since we're in sound bites, I'll focus on one of the priorities of the Brazilian presidency, and that is the review of the 4 main funds. Simon talked about availability and accessibility of funds. And we have a responsibility to, at the very least, make the available funds accessible with greater speed, with greater ease to countries. So that's a minimum bar for the G20 presidency, is to really work with the funds to streamline procedures and processes, to harmonize standards and procedures of application wherever possible, to be much faster and clearer about expectations to get decisions on funding. These are minimum bars that we have to get to. If there's joint programming possibilities, that's great. But I think even before that is what I said. Also, I think enhancing the availability for capacity building, for project preparation, particularly for lower capacity countries, to even have a chance of accessing those funds. And there, I think the funds should tell us, the broader community, what they need. So do we need the philanthropies to get together and have a pool of funding to help with project preparation? If so, let's ask the philanthropies, right? So you're not alone in this exercise, in this review. So for us, that's a huge priority. We think doing better with what we have is the minimum bar, as well as continuing to push the envelope, including on the private sector side. And absolutely what Tatiana said, I think we can amplify by better utilizing the concessional finance in the climate funds to go alongside the work that we're doing with the MDBs to themselves be more fit for purpose to help countries meet their climate ambitions.
Thank you very much. Well, that's an agenda. Xiangpei, after you, kind of how do you see it? What can be achieved next year, particularly on the climate fund space, but within the context of the Sustainable Finance Working Group?
Actually, Miss Tatiana, right? I don't know whether I pronounced it right. Actually, you have given us a very comprehensive agenda and very ambitious, and also Miss Alexia, sorry, you have mentioned many important aspects of the SFWG work next year. In my opinion, I think that there, just as Simon has mentioned, that there are so many agenda items. So what should we concentrate? In my opinion, I think that just as the name of the SFWG, we should concentrate our work on timely and adequate mobilization of resources for climate finance. I think that is the most important. And you have talked about many aspects of this topic. I just want to add one point, one observation. And I think why the multilateral financing is of critical importance. It not only brings together resources from various channels, but also it promotes technological development and capacity building, especially for developing countries. Because the climate finance is quite complicated and with a higher requirement for infrastructure and institutional environment. And I think multilateral financing provides windows for developing countries of learning by doing. Yeah, if we look at those successful projects, we will find that much progress have been made in capacity and technology. Sometimes even the change of behavior of households. I think this is more important. I will give some example. In China, we have a small bank, Zhejiang Bank, very small bank, but it joined PCAF, and it cooperated with IFSC in transition project. So they learned a lot, and they made much progress in sustainable finance. So I would like to emphasize the importance of capacity building, of learning by doing in multilateral financing. I just want to add this point. Thank you.
Fantastic. Tatiana, you're going to just destroy my time clock. Go for
Just
it.
10 seconds to say that we are planning also, it has not been announced as one of the priorities, but we do want to move on implementing the technical assistance action plan that has been approved during the Indian presidency. John, that's for you. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. So listen, thank you all of you, Dirk in his absence, wherever he's trying to get to this evening, absolutely laying out the landscape within which the four funds hopefully are inspired to work more closely together, more effectively together, and to kind of service some of the agendas that you've set out over the last 40 minutes. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking this first panel. So, don't move. No, you move. No, you definitely move, right? So we're going to move straight on to the next panel. I'm not even going to invite you to do any exercises to kind of keep you going. The next panel obviously is the four heads of the four funds. I'm sure part of the reason that you turned up this evening. So could I invite the next panel, please, to join me on the stage. It's an idea, right? Thank you very much. Just whatever you feel. Take a seat. So for those of you only partly in the know, you may be looking for Carlos Manuel. And you may have noticed that he's not on the stage. I'm sure, Chi, you'll fill us in on that. But we're very pleased to have Chizuru here in his stead. Carlos Manuel sends his super regrets, hasn't been able to make it to COP28 for reasons completely beyond his control, and it's really fantastic that we'll have Chi kind of filling in for him on behalf of the GEF in this really important session. So I wanted to kick off, if I may. Oh, you good? Yeah, they're a little like that. That's why I'm sitting. That's why I've been sitting forward the whole time, right? So I wanted to kick off, if I may, just by asking each of you just sort of a simple opening question, which is, we've heard a lot about coordination, we've heard a lot about the benefits of potential coordination. We're going to hear about a declaration a little bit more in a few minutes at the end of this session. We always talk about coordination and cooperation and simplification and efficiency and cohesion and integration and all of these things. Just how easy is that going to be? And I'm just going to go from my right to my left, so perhaps I'm going to start with yourself, just as a sort of opening reflection. What's the big challenge in actually turning that obvious need and opportunity into reality?
Thank you, Simon, and welcome everybody. I think the four funds are, I'm not going to, well, I could potentially speak on behalf of four, but I know my colleagues will say the same thing. It's a real honor to have you all here. It was supposed to be in the joint pavilion, and then the first joint pavilion, let us say. It's not the first time that the heads of the four funds come together. We actually normally meet at COPs and say something about what we are doing together, but it was the first time, it's the first time that we have a joint pavilion, and the logistics didn't allow us to have the event there, but it's great to see, and thank you for coming. We have also issued statements in the past. This is not the first, but I think this is the most ambitious that I have seen. And that is really important. And I'm really happy that we achieved this. You said, look, this question of complementarity and coherence amongst the four funds is being discussed in our boards for quite some time. And I remember, being asked this question consistently about complementarity and coherence. And, in my view, we need more ambition on this. And I think hopefully this statement today brings a new level of ambition. I think we have shied away for quite some time, because it's not an easy topic, let's be honest. We shied away for some time to talk about complementarity, to talk seriously about complementarity. But now we have a commitment, and you will see it in this statement, that we will collectively make efforts to provide our views on complementarity. When it comes to a really big topic, and I consistently hear this from developing countries and our partners, this issue of simplification of access. I like to think of this, and I sometimes say it, if we look critically at our processes, all of us, the four funds, the multilateral development banks, all of us, and we think if we continue to apply the processes we have at the moment, when would we have the full disbursement of these projects and the results on the ground? The projects that we are talking about today. This is the question we need to answer because of the urgency of climate action, because this is a crisis. So I think we need to start from there. If we look critically, everything that we are doing today, if we retain these processes, when are we delivering these results? So I think, so it's good to see a momentum now that I haven't seen before, not just for the funds, but even, as we've heard before, the multilateral development banks, collectively. And in fact, if we exchange views ourselves, I think we might go further. I have worked on climate finance. I've been working on climate finance for quite some time. And my own view is that there's ample scope for harmonization. There is ample scope for harmonization. And we owe it, really. And now we can tell our board members, several of them that were sitting here, make them accountable as well, that please help us in making sure that we are actually harmonizing to the extent possible, not everything, but I think there is ample scope. The MDBs have been doing this in some parts, and I was also part of some of those processes of harmonization of climate finance. What do they consider climate finance? Which was actually quite interesting, because when the banks actually did that, the MDBs, then the market, some of the market players used that. So it was not just that they were harmonizing amongst themselves, but the market players were using it as well. And it brings benefits. We just have to think about it. So to me, you know, this statement, and this is why I'm pleased with this statement. To me, the two critical things that you will see there is this serious intent to talk about complementarity and come up with our position on complementarity. And second is this harmonization, which should drive simplification of access. We are already doing a lot on learning and knowledge sharing and trying to exchange lessons. Joint programming, before I close on this round, I want to say just on joint programming, I think the way to get at this is really at the country level. What we need to do is to work with the countries, equip the countries with what's necessary, so that they themselves say, here's what we would like GCF to do, here's what we would like CIF to do, here's what we would like Jeff to do, but not just thinking about our four, the whole ecosystem in the country, because we are enablers of others. We are enablers of others. So I think that's where we have to invest a little bit more. So let me pause here now.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Chia, I'm going to go straight on to you. Once again, thanks for stepping in. It's pretty much the same question. You know, perhaps sort of going down a level, just sort of giving us examples of kind of what already the GEF is doing and how what you're doing is sort of fit for purpose with this new connectivity that the four funds are seeking to build.
Great, thanks so much, Simon. Good evening, folks. My name is Chizuru Aoki. You can just call me Chiz. First and foremost, deep regrets from Carlos Manuel. He's in Costa Rica. He is fine. He's just unable to come to the COP. But I have stepped in and, I'll try my best to fill his big shoes as well as do justice to this fabulous panel. So first and foremost, one thing I wanted to point out is that we were talking about 4 funds here, but let me just clarify. The GEF, we're actually a family of funds. We have 6 funds at this point, and we actually serve 6 different conventions. So in terms of our perspectives bringing into the complementarity and synergy among the funds, there are certain elements that we can inform from our own collective experiences of trying to work across the funds that we have, but also working with the other funds we have here. So that's one element I wanted to put on the table. So what we have done so far, I think it's fair to say there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of goodwill, and a lot of efforts among the funds and institutions present here to talk about what we can do at the secretariat level. So we talked about trying to harmonize methodologies. We talked about, some of the policy measures, the gender safeguards and so on and so forth, and are they actually applicable to different funds, and how can we make them more easily understood and go from one project to another. Those kinds of things we have done. And to touch upon what Mafalda just said, in terms of trying to work with the countries, we completely agree. When you're talking about joint investment planning, it's really better to do at the country level. And we, as a matter of fact, we just had joint programming discussion and workshop in Uganda between the GEF and GCF, right? And we're trying to do this with the task force that UK has set up in 5 pilot countries. But I have to say I was really intrigued by what Alexia said. You mentioned perhaps we can have some of the philanthropies and what have you come in and help us on this whole notion of capacity to access resources. And this is something that we have been thinking about. Do we have the capacity among the fund secretariat to be able to do the outreach, to do the joint programming support in all of the countries we serve? Maybe not. So perhaps we need to actually think about some of the partners that we can bring to enable us to make that capacity available across the landscape within which the countries we work with, especially the ones where the foundational capacity elements that the Zhang Bei talked about. We may need to be looking into this. Another element that I want to point out that came out of the GEF and GCF collaboration, which is called the Long-Term Vision for Complementarity Cohesion, and I forget the last word here, is that Thank you so much. Collaboration. So we did this analysis, a third-party analysis of looking at policies and procedures, the governance, what have you, because we thought at the end of the day, if we're going to go to the countries and say, here is an opportunity for the JAF and GCF and the countries to work together to do joint programming, we thought it's actually really necessary for us to know how different are the policies, how uniform the policies. And actually, we found out, you know, there's a lot of commonalities, but there are a lot of differences. And there are many, many findings that we're going to talk about in a couple of days, where we do think that building on the efforts that are being made by the secretariats, at this point, I think we need the engagement and endorsement and blessing of the different governance bodies that we have at the end of the day. Because we do think that the policies and procedures, if we're going to move towards harmonization, let alone simplification, there needs to be a collective vision of where the funds should be placing ourselves within the landscape. And that needs some level of harmonization to move forward. And if I may actually add one more thing, this conversation we're having here in terms of simplification and of access isn't just confined to the climate finance sphere. It is something that I personally have seen come up in all the different conventions that we serve. You know, for example, biodiversity, CBD, very, very clear call to simplify access and make it more accessible, and its availability, accessibility and acceleration of support being provided to them. So what's happened is that we were requested to set up a new fund. It's called the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. It's established. We're going to open for business very soon. But the preconditions that parties in CBD COP15 put on the table was that the fund needs to have simplified access procedure, right? So what we have done is for that particular fund is really looking into simplifying the access within that particular fund, right? We're going to have a one-stop procedure. We're going to have a lot more streamlined measures, so on and so forth. And those efforts, we think, will also inform how the different funds under the JEF umbrella will simplify, which we also think can help inform funds across the table here can look forward to harmonizing and simplifying. So I'll stop right there. Thanks.
Chi, thank you. Actually, your penultimate comment I'm going to come back to in my second round, because I'm keen to get all of your take on kind of what you want from that G20 process, since it has many of those shareholders that you have just been referring to. Mikko, may I come on to you? It's, in a sense, the same question, but I want to make it slightly more complicated, of course, just by drawing in the other Simon's comments that perhaps the adaptation side of the funding game, is amongst the most difficult pieces of this equation, even although, as we see, those adaptation needs are growing and growing very rapidly all the time. And I was keen perhaps to reflect on both the general question, which is this interconnectivity and the possibilities of it, but how that relates to your efforts to increase the flow of resources into adaptation financing.
Thank you, Simon. First of all, it's really great to be with colleagues here. It's not something really new. We've been doing this for 7 or 8 years, I think, something like that already. But it's work in progress, and I think we are getting better in harmonizing and aligning our processes. The Adaptation Fund has already done quite a lot with our colleagues. For example, with the GCF in terms of accreditation, which is the first step that an organization needs to go through to access funding. We have had a harmonized, a fast-track accreditation process for that 7 or 8 years already, and that has helped many countries in accessing resources from both funds, and that's worked very well. At the level of projects, we've worked in parallel with both with the JEF and with the CIFs over the years. With the GCF, we have a structured framework for scaling up, which is really important, taking into account the fact that Adaptation Fund is a smaller fund. Our grants are typically smaller than the GCF grants, but almost 20 Adaptation Fund projects have been scaled up by GCF, and that's a great win-win in both funds, in which both funds' comparative advantages have been made use of the Adaptation Fund's ability to pioneer early projects and the GCF's ability to do that in scale. So that's really great. Also in the area of South-South cooperation, that's really important. Adaptation is local. The role of local communities, and we've been doing that through direct access, and the direct access entities from around the world have a community of practice called Community of Practice of Direct Access Entities, and that's now shared between the Adaptation Fund and the GCF. It's true, coming back to the second part of your question, that adaptation finance is more challenging. It's more difficult to develop business models at this point, at least. We are improving, but much needs to be done on grant basis, as the previous speakers have said. We need to scale that up. We see from IPCC reports that we are really facing a risk of losing the climate battle, and it's becoming more and more difficult to adapt, and the costs are increasing. So in order to avoid getting to the costs in losses and damages, we really need to invest in costs in adaptation, and we are doing best that together. We as the Adaptation Fund have been growing rapidly and increasingly in the last few years. We've always tried to keep our processes as simple as possible, and it has been relatively easy for us to do that since we are a relatively simple animal. We only provide grant-based funding. It's only up to $10 or $15 million per project. But the projects themselves can be quite complex, and things like safeguards are very important in that context. But for example, the turnaround time for project proposals in our case is 3 weeks, which is quite quick, I would say. In our new medium-term strategy, we are really trying to accelerate and scale up, work with the other climate funds, but also beyond those with the larger investors, but also looking increasingly at the local level and local participation. We have a growing number of contributors, and I'm really pleased to note today we just had news that we have the 30th contributor. That's government of Denmark, so thank you, Denmark, if any one of you is in the room. That's in addition to the volume, that's another signal that we are working really together, that we are combining a number of countries, and the same goes with working together with the different climate funds. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mikko, very much. Although we started late, I've just been told we can't stop late. And so, in fact, we're going to finish this round, and we're not going to be able to do a second round because we have a hard stop at 8, a security requirement, apparently. So, Louis, no pressure on you at all. But this had better be good, right? And so let me come to you last, if I may, last and short, but sharp. And just perhaps, help us understand again that connectivity piece, that brings the four of you together this evening, but particularly given how CIF has been especially successful at crowding in private funds, and kind of how that connectivity could leverage those skills and capabilities and experiences that you've had.
Yeah. For me, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm in an acting capacity or an interim capacity, contrary to my colleagues, but I'm in a special place. I'm in the middle of Mafalda, the former CEO of the CIF, and then I have here in the room the incoming CEO, Tarai Badagesin. Please. For us in the CIF family, we are extremely pleased with this transition. I believe that the former CEO left us fully equipped, and the leader of the future has a great vision and tons of the dynamism. And what I appreciate the most is a significant private sector experience. She has seen a lot on the ground, and that is critical at this moment of the CIF. So we are in a good place, and particularly myself right now in this session. Having said that, let me speed up because I see that I have 3 minutes to deliver the 3 messages from the CIF side. A little bit on the previous point, I believe that the previous panel gave us significant advice already. I like the idea of using the baselines that the US Secretary put together. I like the idea of working with Brazil in the context of the G20 and the bridge with Italy in the G7 and the working group. So we have 3 important, and then we have the third driver, which is the significant transformation that is happening in the MDB space, where the CIF has the theory of change. So I feel that this is the right moment to strike this conversation. And in the CIF, we had no doubt in joining this statement, this declaration. From A through Z, we have no objection. We are fully supportive of this. But now it's, well, what to do with it? And I believe that the first thing that we need to recognize is that each fund has own strengths, not weaknesses, because if we work with the weaknesses, we will never get anywhere. But if we work with the strengths, then we can start building upon. And I would say that the CIF is in a good place to build upon, the next level of ambition. Why? Because over the past year, we have gone through significant internal reforms, from the structure of governance to the interactions with the NDBs, and now we are going into the streamlining of our procedures. And that will come together with then facilitating the interaction with our colleagues in the multilateral, in the climate funds. That's I like to make clear. Now, going to the specific question, I think that one of the strengths of the CIF is precisely the capacity that we have to mobilize the private sector. Because when you go into this, and the previous panel already discussed that you need to have the foundation. What is the foundation? Well, you have a gigantic need for bringing resources to climate action. So where do you start? You need to start kicking this off with the concessional financing that is required. And then out of that, you unlock the rest of the pieces. For us, it's clear because the model works. One, we work with the multilateral development banks. They have tremendous capacity to mobilize the public and private sector finance. And the last is we have capacity to bring together the partners, the countries, together under one umbrella that we call the programmatic investment plans.
Louis, you have met the 5 minutes in brilliant form. And ladies and gentlemen, a session curtailed, but a journey started. So please join me in thanking very much the 4 leaders.
Let me just say that it was great to see that we will be led by 3 women in the G20 process.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Can we just put our hands together for the technical team and security staff who do everything they can to keep us safe and serve us. A reminder that as we break, we've been told, asked, begged to be better with what we have and to push the bar in new opportunities. And that is what next year looks like for all of us, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Principals, can we remain on stage, please? Can we just remain on stage? We're taking one photo. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find the joint declaration on each of the fund's websites, and we ask you, please invite you to read that at your leisure. Thank you.